China's economy is a disaster because of mismanaged COVID policy. But worst of all, there's still a massive cover-up going on. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, especially to look into controversial topics like government cover-ups, you should be using a VPN like Surfshark to protect your identity. China is facing two major disasters right now, the economy and COVID. A year of large-scale COVID lockdowns wrecked the Chinese economy in 2022. But the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, spent billions to build up its specialized COVID economy, including mass testing, quarantine camps, disinfecting crews, etc. So at least there were jobs, even if it was mainly jobs for these guys. It was perfect for people who always wanted to be a ninja, but also a janitor. Then in December, the CCP made a sudden policy U-turn. They ended zero COVID because they knew they couldn't keep suppressing the virus like it were information, religious dissidents, political dissidents, everyday citizens, reality. You get the point. I mean, they definitely tried. The COVID infections were already spreading out of control even before they ended zero COVID. They also ended zero COVID because the policy was bankrupting the state. But that has created its own wave of problems. Medical companies that made test kits and PPE are losing business. So now they're laying off workers or simply not paying them. And it's hard for these workers to find new jobs since the rest of the economy is in shambles. And that means unrest. Here you can see workers at a COVID test kit maker in Chongqing throwing things at the police. These workers are chanting, "Pay me back, pay me back." This kind of thing is happening across the country. A lot of the COVID workers are migrants from the countryside. They want to travel home for Lunar New Year, but the companies haven't paid them for all their work. And it's especially upsetting because those same companies that are now laying people off made big profits last year from the government. The province of Guangdong alone spent $22 billion on zero COVID over the last 3 years. So basically, local governments spent a lot of money that put them even deeper into debt. Certain companies made huge profits and workers didn't get paid. Before long, these ninja janitors will start brawling. And you don't want to fight a ninja janitor because they always sweep the leg. Meanwhile, with the end of zero COVID, cases of infection in China are skyrocketing. One study says COVID cases are at 900 million, which would mean about 2/3 of the entire Chinese population has gotten infected. Making this worse is that hundreds of millions of Chinese are traveling to their hometowns ahead of the Lunar New Year on January 23rd. But don't worry, because according to China's COVID czar, infections have dropped to a low level. A low level, relatively speaking. What does relatively low even mean? No one has any idea because the CCP's been covering it up. For example, how many people in China have died from COVID? Well, officially, China reports 60,000 COVID deaths since early December. That's more than 10 times their previously admitted figure of just 5,000 some deaths. But the thing to remember about China's official statistics is they always have a political purpose, which means they're usually a lie. In this case, a massive lie. If the same percentage of people die in China from COVID as in the US, the real number of deaths in China is easily in the millions. Meaning, there's a huge tragedy happening in China right now, and very few people have any idea. But the truth is, we just don't actually know how many people have died. And the CCP is working hard to make sure the world never knows. At the end of last month, Chinese authorities stopped publishing daily COVID data. They also essentially stopped testing people, because if you don't test them, then they can't prove they had COVID. And now doctors are discouraged from citing COVID on death certificates, just to ensure that in the future there'll be no easy way to ever find out how many people died. It's a massive cover-up on top of a massive cover-up. It's like Inception. Only instead of being in a dream and it ending abruptly, we're in a nightmare that lasts forever. It's hard for the Chinese Communist Party to earn people's trust when they're claiming hardly anyone is dying from COVID. Tell that to these people, waiting in long lines for a crematorium in Shanghai. Yep, they're standing outside with their dead loved ones, waiting for a chance to cremate them. And the CCP says hardly anyone is dying? You know, they could cremate people a lot faster if only the CCP would put their gaslighting to better use. Another downside to the party covering up how bad COVID is it means local officials can't justify putting lots of resources into helping people who are sick. So the Chinese masses have to take the COVID fight into their own hands. There are long lines at Chinese pharmacies with people trying to buy basic drugs like ibuprofen to reduce fever. Does standing for hours out in the cold also help bring down your temperature? The only thing people in China aren't lining up to do right now is congratulate the CCP on a job well done. People have turned to social media for help, like phone apps and WeChat groups where people offer to share their unused medicine with each other, which is actually really nice. But the CCP does not think this is nice, because it means citizens are now gaining real-world experience in effectively living without the party. And the traumatic experiences risk upending the social contract that underpins the Communist Party's legitimacy, an acceptance of one-party rule in return for competent governance that keeps people safe and improves their lives. Well, with 900 million people infected, despite years of lockdown, I'm not sure people feel competent governance has kept them safe or improved their lives. And after the break, the Chinese Communist Party really needs money. Your money. Welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party is in a difficult financial situation. The years of COVID lockdowns and supply chain problems have badly hurt manufacturing and exports. Not to mention all the money the government spent on zero COVID stuff that turned out to not actually stop COVID. Samuel Bankman-Fried made better, more honest investing decisions than the CCP. So this week, China sent its vice premier to the World Economic Forum in Davos to beg money from the global elite. Fortunately, the global elite have finally realized that the Chinese Communist Party lies about everything and, who am I kidding? The global elite took the bait. I know we've been burned by this the last 47 times, but this time will definitely be different. The CEO of the multi-billion-dollar money management firm Fidelity International said we should definitely keep putting our money in China. And U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen met with the vice premier and came out of that meeting saying, hey, let's not have conflict with China, okay? The U.S. doesn't want conflict with the regime that openly wants to destroy the U.S.? Janet Yellen said the U.S. and China can still work together on macroeconomic cooperation and climate finance. Oh good, let's work with China on climate change. For example, by buying solar panels produced in Chinese factories, powered by government subsidies, coal power, and even forced labor. It's win-win mutual cooperation. The CCP gets the U.S.'s money, and the U.S. gets to feel like using solar panels makes them good people. China has a new homegrown airplane that could break Airbus and Boeing's duopoly on plane manufacturing. It's called the C919. It's China's first domestically built large passenger aircraft. It's built by Comac, a state-owned company. They're still doing test flights, but already state-run media is promoting it like it's some kind of major victory. And China, of course, wants its own knockoff airplanes to compete with the West because they want their own knockoff everything to compete with the West. Even their knockoff KFC, which is wrong in so many ways. The Mercator Institute for China Studies based in Europe says production glitches or safety issues aside, Comac's domestic market share looks set to climb steadily. Okay, the production glitches and safety issues thing, I wouldn't set that aside just yet. The point is, Comac wants to outcompete Airbus and Boeing. Already last year, orders for C919s were more than double orders for its Boeing counterpart, the 737, which sounds impressive, except those orders were mostly from Chinese state-owned airlines and financial institutions. So it doesn't actually mean the C919s are popular. That'd be like saying cauliflower is popular amongst kids whose parents only let them eat cauliflower. And that's a perfect analogy since cauliflower is just a cheap knockoff of broccoli. But here's the thing Chinese state-run media won't tell you about the C919. A lot of it is made from foreign parts. That's right, key components like the engines, control systems, and landing gear are all made by US and European companies. Here's why this is a problem. It makes the Western supply chains more integrated with China at a time when it should be less. Western companies will rely on the Chinese markets to sell their parts, and then airlines around the world will start relying on Chinese planes. So these companies will try to influence government policy to make sure the China market stays available. Before you know it, cheap knockoffs will become the norm around the world, which, as we know, will be deeply problematic. The Chinese regime is also trying to shore up cooperation in Africa. China's foreign minister made a big Africa tour this month. His latest stop was Egypt. China is spending billions of dollars on state-led projects in Egypt, including bankrolling construction of the new capital outside Cairo. While in Africa, China's foreign minister also visited Gabon, Angola, Benin, and Ethiopia. Ethiopia, if you remember, is where China built the African Union's new headquarters as a gift, and then bugged it for state secrets for 5 years until they were caught. So why on earth is Egypt letting China build their new capital? Of all the countries on earth, you'd think Egypt would be the first to spot a pyramid scheme. The Hong Kong government has denied entry to a Japanese photographer who captured the 2019 pro-democracy protests. Why was he denied entry? Well, there was no official reason given, but I imagine it's because she's a hostile foreign force who subverted China's state power. Specifically, last year, she showed her Hong Kong photos in an exhibition in Japan. A lot of people must have seen her photos, including, I suppose, Chinese agents. That's fair, though. You'd have to be a hostile foreign force to show photos that embarrass the CCP, like these, for example. Speaking of people subverting China's state power, all of the Hong Kong protesters. For more than a year, the Hong Kong government has been running a de-radicalization program for people who took part in the 2019 demonstrations. De-radicalization? Like making something less radical? What does that turn Ninja Turtles into? Ninja Janitor Turtles? The program is designed to help former protesters learn to love China, which obviously anyone would after being arrested for peacefully protesting and then being forced to undergo brainwashing. So far, 474 inmates have taken part in this de-radicalization over the past 14 months. That's out of more than 2,000 protesters who have been arrested and charged. The Globe and Mail tried to get details of the de-radicalization program, but the Hong Kong government refused to disclose them, on the grounds that if people knew what was being taught, it could be used by individuals or parties with ulterior motives to give an incomplete and inaccurate account of the programs, or even worse, make unfair criticisms against them. Well, I, for one, would never make unfair criticisms of the Chinese or Hong Kong governments. All my criticisms are completely fair. And I do love China, just not the CCP. And this episode is sponsored by Surfshark. When you go online, everything you do is being tracked and logged by the websites you visit and your internet service provider, and in many cases, by your government, or by one foreign government in particular that bankrolled your country's telecom network. The point is, no matter where you live or what you do online, you should always be keeping your internet activity private with a VPN. And now, Surfshark has servers you can connect to in over 100 countries. That's more than any other VPN, so that makes your connections faster and more reliable. Plus, Surfshark has top-of-the-line encryption and a no-logs policy, meaning they don't collect your browsing data. In fact, Surfshark was rated Editor's Choice for the best VPN for privacy and security by PC Mag. So check out Surfshark. With just one Surfshark account, you can connect as many devices as you want. Try it out now. Surfshark has a special deal that includes 83% off a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months for free. You can protect yourself for just $221 a month. So go to surfshark.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to secure this deal. The link is in the description below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.